Today we're going to be talking about the greatest gunsmith in all of history. Wait, that's not my thing. Hold on. Hi, friends. Today we're going to be talking about the greatest gunsmith in all of history. Hold on, no. Welcome to the job trailer. Today we are going to talk about everything from Abraham Lincoln and Joseph Smith to CEO heart attacks and everything in between in the interesting life of John Moses Browning. Born January 23rd of 1855 in Ogden, Utah, John was one of 22 kids and grew up to be one of the most impactful gunsmiths in modern firearms history. While John's life was super interesting, and we'll get into that, we can't really do a full deep dive on him without talking about his inspiration first, his father, John Browning. Jonathan Browning, born in 1805 in Sumner County, Tennessee, had a pretty normal childhood growing up, but soon developed a hobby of working on and repairing guns and firearms. Soon after becoming an adult, at the age of 21, Jonathan married his first wife, Elizabeth, and ended up having 12 children with her. As life went on, Jonathan moved his entire family to Quincy, Illinois in 1834 to pursue a life of farming and to continue his hobby of gunsmithing. Here in Quincy, he opened up a store that specialized in blacksmithing, locksmithing, and gunsmithing, and he soon started to interact with more and more of the Mormon refugees that were fleeing persecution. You see, Mormonism was pretty new at the time, and in 1831, they believed that Missouri was the place to meet for Jesus' second coming. They soon started to flood the state, and the old settlers, as you would call them, didn't take too kindly to this. You see, there was a bunch of locals, they're the old settlers that I talked about, and they're just in the middle of Missouri minding their business, and a bunch of people start busting into their town, preaching their new religion, and they weren't having it. Their beliefs didn't really align with the Mormon religion, and they thought that a man named Joseph Smith had a little too much power, and they wanted to put an end to that. Tensions began to rise, and in 1833, violence broke out between the old settlers and the new Mormon religion. Soon after this, the Missouri legislature passed a law stating that Cadwell County was the place for the Mormons to go. But more and more Mormons kept coming to Missouri, and more and more Mormons kept moving to Missouri, and especially Cadwell County. And in 1838, a small group of Mormons attacked a authorized militia, believing that it was a mob of old settlers. This event would cause the at-the-time governor, Lilburn Boggs, to sign a declaration saying that the Mormons were no longer welcome in Missouri, and to expel them by any means necessary. The violence continued to grow until the evening of October 30th, 1838, when a mob launched a surprise attack on a Mormon village, killing 18 of the members. From this point on, around 8,000 Mormons would pack up their things and move to the Nauvoo region of Illinois. While all of this is going on, Jonathan is still just working in his little shop in Quincy, Illinois, and he's starting to meet people in the town. And word gets around that Jonathan's a pretty nice guy, actually. So nice that the townspeople eventually elected him Justice of the Peace in 1840. For those of you who don't know, a Justice of the Peace is like a low-level judge who presides over minor civil or little bit of criminal disputes within the town. A cool little tangent here. While Jonathan was living in Quincy, his cousin, Orville Browning, was a senator. And Orville eventually one night introduced Jonathan to his good lawyer buddy named Abraham Lincoln. They apparently ended up being pretty good friends because on multiple occasions Abraham Lincoln would crash at Jonathan Browning's house. And in my head it goes something like they're hanging out at the bar and they've had a few beers and Jonathan's wife is like, "Abe, there's no way you're taking your horse home. You're way too drunk to ride." Your wife would be so mad. After living and working in Quincy for a few years and interacting with so many of the Mormon refugees fleeing Missouri, Jonathan thought, it might be a good idea to check all this Mormonism stuff out. So he decided to go and meet up with a guy named Joseph Smith. Yeah, that Joseph Smith. And he apparently liked what he had to say so much that Jonathan then converted to Mormonism and became part of the church. But while all of this is going on in the background, Jonathan was still in his shop tinkering with guns. And it was at this point in his life that he made one of the first major breakthroughs in firearms. He created the sliding breech repeating rifle, or the slide gun, sometimes called a harmonica gun. The best way I can describe this gun to you is by using my trusty old school BB gun here. If you look at this piece right here, it works in pretty much the same way. You pull the slide back, you load this piece here, this would be the slide, with all your cartridges. And you put it in here, and you put it in here, and you can rack it forward, take a shot, pull back, slide, rack it forward, take a shot. This would allow you to get 5 shots off in very quick succession, and this changed the battlefield forever. Instead of having to sit there and reload every round individually, you can get 5 of them off just like that. In 1844, the Mormons in the Nauvoo region started to face more persecution. The first and the only issue of the local newspaper, the Nauvoo Expositor, shined a light on Joseph Smith's thing for multiple wives. Joseph Smith, pretty angry at being outed, ordered the newspaper to be shut down and the printing press destroyed. This pissed off the locals a lot, infringing on the First Amendment rights. Due to the public outrage, Smith was then arrested and charged with treason, but that just was not enough. A mob formed around the jail where he was being held, and after a slight altercation, Smith ended up being dead at the end of it. Some say he was murdered, and some say he fell out of a window, but we'll never actually know. But either way, he wasn't around anymore, so a man named Brigham Young filled his spot in 1845, and they started to head west. Soon after, in 1846, with all of his friends heading out west, Jonathan decided to pack up his family once more and head out with them. But the catch is, he didn't make it all the way out west right off the bat. Brigham Young personally asked Jonathan to stay behind in Council Bluffs, Iowa, to help arm and prepare the Mormon pioneers for the long journey out west. He stayed here lending a hand in preparing people until 1852, when he himself got to follow out to Salt Lake City. Once again, he didn't make it all the way to Salt Lake City. On his way out, he stopped in a place called Ogden, Utah, where he looked around and thought this would be a great spot for a gun store. So, that's what he did. He dropped his things, put up a gun store, and that's where he lived for the rest of his life until 1879, when he died at the age of 74. It has been said that when he died, he was surrounded by his entire family. All 3 wives and 22 children. Dude could not pull out of a driveway. But we're not here to talk about Jonathan Browning. We're here to talk about John Browning, one of his 22 children. Well, there's actually a few John Brownings, but that's besides the point. They were stepbrothers, it doesn't count. John Moses Browning was the lucky one. Young John would spend a good portion of his childhood in his dad's gun shop, working on guns and tinkering with him. I mean, what else do you do when you have 22 other siblings living in the house? You gotta get out sometime. Here in his father's gun shop, John would learn the basics of gunsmithing and repair, and eventually develop a love for the craft. In his early teens, John would scrounge the gunsmithing shop and find a bunch of spare parts, and he built his very own gun from scratch to give to his brother as a birthday present. In the spring of 1878, young John would begin working on designs for his very own rifle, and a little over a year and a half later, he would get his first ever patent for his very own gun. This gun would eventually become known as the Browning single-shot rifle, and this is where the legend of John Moses Browning begins. On April 10th, 1879, John would marry his childhood sweetheart, Rachel Teresa Child. John and Rachel would go on to have 10 children over the lifetime, but sadly, 2 of them passed away in early childhood. I mean, it's part of the times. Very soon after John got married, his father would die at the age of 74, and it would be up to him and his brother, Matthew S. Browning, to take over his father's company. Between 1880 and 1883, John and his brother would go on to file several more patents, including a bolt-action, tube-fed magazine rifle, and an exposed hammer lever-action tube-fed magazine rifle. Both of these guns were the first of their kind, and in 1883, John's life would go on to change forever, as well as the rest of firearms history. T.G. Bennett, the vice president and general manager for Winchester, would soon pay the brothers a visit. The higher-ups at Winchester caught wind of John's first design and decided that they wanted to buy the patent for themselves. Winchester offered John a massive $8,000 deal, which is around $200,000 today, for his patent on the single-shot rifle. And so, a beautiful partnership was born, Browning and Winchester. Soon after this, Winchester, realizing they had a genius on their hands, wanted a new design for a shotgun, but they wanted it to be a lever action. So, John got to work and designed a lever action shotgun for them. But with a little bit of tinkering, he soon converted it to a pump action model for himself. When you think about it, this is pretty genius actually, because, a lever action is not really that efficient, and let's be honest, most guys are a lot more familiar with that motion than that motion. Stay. Anyway, the guys at Winchester would dream up their wildest dreams of gun designs and run them past John, and John would just pump them out one after another. During his time partnered with Winchester, John would create some of the most iconic guns that we still know today. The first on that list would be his single-shot rifle that we talked about, which became the Winchester 1885. He would also design and invent a lever-action gun called the Winchester 1894, and this is an important gun because it was the first long rifle at the time to ever use a smokeless .30-30 cartridge. Smokeless powder was relatively new at the time, only being invented a few years earlier in 1886. This had a few advantages over the previously used black powder. First, and most importantly, being you don't have a giant cloud of smoke in front of you after a couple shots, as the name implies, smokeless. This also means that because there wasn't a lot of smoke, it's a cleaner burning cartridge, which meant it's easier on the guns and it's easier to maintain and clean. Besides being less likely to malfunction due to a cleaner burning gun, another benefit of smokeless powder is that the gas expands more rapidly. More rapid gas expansion means a higher muzzle velocity, and a higher muzzle velocity means more stopping power. This allowed the use of a smaller, lighter cartridge to have the same amount of power as one of the heavier, more bulky, more dirty black powder cartridges. And remember this, faster and smaller means more effective. More effective distance and a flatter trajectory when you're shooting, so you don't have to account for as much drop. See, that's what I always say. Faster and smaller is better, but no, the wife says no. After the Model 94 came out, guess what? The Model 95. This was essentially just a big brother to the 94, but it had purposes in both hunting and military application this time. After the Model 95 came the Model 1900. This was a .22 caliber bolt-action rifle used for small game. For those of you who don't know, bolt action just means this. This is your bolt, and that's the action. You slide it back, round pops up, slide it in, lock it down, and you're good to go. And no, this is not just an excuse to show off all the guns I never get to shoot. If we're talking about Browning's most famous designs, we'd be remiss not to mention the Winchester 1897 shotgun. This gun gained infamy during World War I by its use from the United States military in the trenches. While John spent most of his time inventing and innovating, he would take breaks to go get real-world inspiration. One of the ways he would do this was to go to shooting competitions. At one of these competitions, as he was watching the people take their shots and hit their targets, John was accidentally struck with an idea. While he was watching one of these matches, John noticed that every time one of the competitors took their shots, the grass around the end of the barrel would move around a little bit. This gave him the idea that there was just unused gas in the end of the barrel after the bullet left that was just dissipating out into thin air, and he thought of a way to take use of that. In his idea, he figured he could harness some of this unused gas and reroute it to make the gun reload itself. He immediately went to work with this faint idea in mind, and eventually, in January of 1890, he filed his first patent for a gas-operated reloading rifle. This breakthrough would lead to a patent being filed in 1892 for the Browning Peacemaker, a Colt model automatic machine gun. This would be followed by the first semi-automatic pistol patent being filed in 1895, and in 1900, a couple more patents being filed dealing with auto-reloading shotguns and auto-reloading rifles, eventually being sold as the Remington Model 8. The idea that hit Browning that day on the range would forever change the trajectory of firearms manufacturing. With the patent for the autoloading shotgun granted to John Moses Browning, he packed up his things and headed off to Winchester to show off his new toy. But this time there was something a bit different. You see, how everything had worked up to this point was John would come up with an idea, he would get a patent on it, and then once he had a working model, he would go over to Winchester to show off his new toy. And if Winchester gave it the thumbs up, they would buy the patent from him for a one-time fee and manufacture it as their own. But John had noticed how much money that they were making from his ideas, and he wanted to switch to more of a royalties-based payment option. The higher-ups at Winchester did not want to budge on this at all, and in January of 1902, John Moses Browning and Winchester parted ways, ending their 19-year partnership together. But now that the partnership was over, John had this sweet new shotgun, but nobody to manufacture it for him. So he took a good long look around and decided to go give Remington a try. And as he was going to walk into the meeting with Remington, the owner of the company suddenly died of a heart attack and unintentionally canceled the meeting. So John was sitting there with his brand new gun and said, well, Winchester doesn't want to pay me for my guns, and Remington has something more important going on, I guess. So I guess I'm going to pack my bags and go to Belgium. That's the answer. Once in Belgium, John headed over to a little company called Fabrique FN. The company is FN. You know, the guys that make the FAL and the P90, those guys, yeah. A deal was met and the Browning Auto 5 shotgun was born. FN would exclusively manufacture and produce the shotgun until in 1905 restrictive tariffs forced FN to sell the patent to Remington and allow them to manufacture and sell it as their own. At this point, Browning was so well known and respected in the firearms industry that in 1905 he was awarded the John Scott Medal for Innovation for auto pistols. By the way, in his spare time he created auto pistols. For those of you who don't know what the John Scott Medal is, like me before I did the research on it, it is a medal awarded to people who, and I quote, increased the comfort, welfare, and happiness of humankind. I just want to take a moment to appreciate the irony in that statement. Other recipients of this medal were like Nikola Tesla, Edison, the Wright brothers, and understandably so. But to give the medal to the man that made guns more efficient at killing, I mean, I understand it from the perspective of America or, good countries, but I bet you that there are a few losing countries whose comfort, welfare, and happiness were not improved by John Moses Browning. Anyway, back to the story. Browning is now happily partnered with FN, and he's about to make all of his previous inventions look like child's play. In 1909, he filed a patent for a semi-auto 25 caliber pistol that was sold by both FN and Colt, and eventually down the line by the Browning Company itself. In 1910, Browning filed one of his most famous patents, the Colt 1911 chambered in God's caliber of 45 ACP, winner of both world wars and the most reliable gun you will ever shoot in your life. In 1914, Belgium wanted to honor Browning's achievements, so they made him an honorary knight. But that didn't slow him down at all, because in 1917, Browning held his first public demonstration in Washington, D.C. of the Browning .30 caliber machine gun, or the M1917. But this was just the big brother to the M1918, or the Browning automatic rifle, better known as the BAR. This, to put it simply, is just a portable version of the M1917. The BAR provided a massive tactical advantage to the Allied troops in World War I. Now they have a more comparable gun to the German machine guns. Previously, they would just hear the call over the top, and out of the trench they'd go straight into the German machine gun fire. But now, they had something that they could fight with. The BAR gave the Allied forces a comparable automatic machine gun fire to the Germans, and it saw use in both World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. After the BAR came the .50 caliber machine gun, which was very similar to the M1917, but it was water-cooled and obviously had a bigger round in it. We could keep going down the list of all the guns that Browning developed, but it's cold in here and we don't got time for that, so I'll just briefly touch on some of them, but if you want to see a complete list of all of his patents and the guns that he designed, I will leave links down in the description. In 1918, Browning tested his first working version of the M250 cal, better known as the Ma Deuce. It didn't end up seeing war until after World War I, but it is still in use today in some militaries. After the M250 cal, in his spare time he toyed around with the 37mm aircraft cannon, and developed the Browning High Power, a 9mm pistol that saw extensive use in military and some police service. After the High Power came out, Browning took some time for himself and created the first ever over-under shotgun called the Browning Superposed. This was kind of a pet project for him and ended up leading the company in the direction that it's at today. Sadly, in 1926, John Moses Browning died of a heart attack while working with a new gun design with his son Van. He truly loved his craft as he died working at the workbench. 1 year after his death, the J.M. and M.S. Browning Company was created. The J.M. obviously standing for John Moses, and the M.S. was the initials of the brother that helped him create the company and his legacy. The J.M. and M.S. Browning Company would go on to add more firearms to its collection as well as other outdoor accessories, and then, in 1977, FN bought the parent company. From then on, the company would be bought and sold, and its subsidiaries would be sold off. Inspired and mentored by his father, John Moses Browning led a full life of innovation and achievement, and he kept pursuing that until the day he died. He completely reinvented the firearms industry, starting with his single-shot rifle and working his way all the way to fully automatic machine guns. Because of this, he is known as the father of modern-day firearms. And rightfully so. Almost every gun on the market today, in some way or another, can be traced back to one of John Moses Browning's designs. During his lifetime, John would work with multiple companies, including Winchester, Colt, Remington, Savage, Stevens, and FN. He left a legacy of innovation and invention that is unmatched by anybody in firearms history. So in short, I just want to say thank you, John, for making all the firearms that I love and I find so interesting. And thank you for watching. If you made it this far into the video, I want to say a genuine thank you. If you can't tell, this is my first video I've ever made, and I know there's a few things that could be done better. If you would leave some sort of tip or something in the comments down below that I can improve on, I would greatly appreciate it, and I'll do my best to fix it for the next video. Thank you.